I was playing my first game on Saturday against Grzegorz Gajewski, who is a well-known theoretician. I'm not really sure who he is working for. I think Vishy Anand. I'm not really 100% sure. I think so. So he's a well-known theoretician and doesn't play actively himself. So his level is about 2650. And he's dropped about 2590. Doesn't matter. He's not very active, but still a lot of fun for me to play against him. And against Grzegorz, I've played before a couple of times. Pretty much all games I play with white. I don't know, sometimes this happens. You play with white or black against the same opponent many games in a row. Sometimes it's weird, but it happens. So once again, I was playing with white. We had a couple of draws before, and this time I thought I want to get some fight, right? So, of course, in a team event, the most important factor is the team result. So that's what it makes it special. That's why in the team event, the personal ambition has to be put aside. So there's 8 boards playing against each other. The team itself has, I'm not sure, about 20 players. So you can select and plan ahead which player is going to play in which team. So 8 boards. And the last board is something like international master level, so about 2450. So there's something like 6 grandmasters pretty much every single match. We are not even the strongest team, so we're just something like a middle team fighting for our place in the league. So this league is incredibly strong. So I was playing board 3, d6. Grzegorz, he remains true to the spirit of his main weapon, which is the Najdorf. Actually, when I was preparing, I was hoping that he's gonna play e6 because after d4, c takes knight e4, a6, it's his second main weapon. And incidentally, against the Sicilian Khan, I have written myself together with Igor Kovalenko a course on Chessable. So I really wanted to test how good is his knowledge in the Khan, because I wrote it from the black's perspective. And I thought it would be very interesting to play myself against my system. So he didn't play. He played e6. Of course, d4 is the main move here. But since something like, I don't know, about 5 years, I had the belief that it kind of makes no sense for white to play d4 if after d4, c takes knight e4, a knight f6, knight c3, a6, white has tried literally every single legal move. h3, h4, g3, f3, f4, bishop e2, bishop d3, bishop c4, bishop d2, bishop b3, bishop g5, a3, a4, knight b3, knight f3, queen e2, queen d3, queen f3. All the moves. I'm not sure, maybe a b3 probably, rook b1, rook g1. Everything has been tested. And it kind of makes no sense for me to try to justify the approach and seek something at that moment when I can do it right away. So that's why, since something like 5 years, my belief has that a bishop b5 has to be one of the most critical choices, because it's in the same spirit as Ra Lopez. So you see e4, knight f3, bishop b5. Those are the typical moves of the Ra Lopez. And also we develop a piece and do it with a tempo. So also I think it very nicely suits the fact that you imagine an average profile of a player who plays the Najdorf, and the first big names would come to your mind, probably Garry Kasparov, maybe Hikaru Nakamura, Maxim Vachier-Lagrave. I mean, those are super sharp players. And bishop b5, it's like coming with a fire extinguisher and literally forcing, yeah, MVL, of course, yeah, and forcing black to play positional chess. And that's what I really like it about this bishop b5. Not only it's developing move with a tempo, but it also extinguishes a lot of sharpness that black can do. So 97, the reputation is that this is play between experts of the Najdorf, because bishop d7 is kind of peaceful. Bishop d7, you can take it. c4, knight c3, d4, white setups the Marazzi bind. And black literally is begging for the draw because, I mean, white is not really risking anything. And I had one of the previous streams about the Marozzi bind, and I released a video later on my YouTube channel specifically about the Marozzi bind system, although it was from a different league. I believe it was the Danish league. So 97, and why 97? Why black does this? He wants to play a6 next, and then let's say if I'm careless, I don't know what I'm doing here, and I take on d7. Even though white is behind, white is ahead in development, black has the so-called two bishop advantage. And at a competitive level, two bishops in the long term they're considered to be the minimal advantage, because if you think about your games, what's the probability that the position is going to open? I would say very, very high. So that's why there's the common belief that the bishop in the long term should be a stronger piece. I mean, it's not really so simple, but you get the idea, right? So that's why, of course, I don't want to take on d7. There's many combinations, and specifically against my opponent, I had prepared this bishop a4. And this is very, very interesting move. And I am forming my belief that against knight e7, this is, at the moment, the strongest move. So you might be like, what? Why? Bishop a4, what is this, right? Because I'm wasting the tempo for my bishop. But actually the idea is much, much deeper, because black may want to play a6, naturally trap the bishop. But after a6, we still want to play the so-called Marozzi bind of c4, knight c3, stopping not only black to play b5, but also we set up the Marozzi bind, which is a very powerful positional weapon. So for example, it's very easy for black to misplay this. For example, a6, here, e6, let's say here, bishop e7, d4, queen d4, short castle, rook d1. You know, when I talked with my opponent after the game, so we shared some knowledge about this line. He didn't know this one. And he said, oh, what's so dangerous about this line, right? So it's queen c7, and seemingly black is continuing normal development. But there's a surprise. Take it, and bishop f4. And suddenly it's very difficult for black to defend the pawn on d6 because e5 runs into knight e5. Bishop e5, bishop f6, queen d7, and black is simply losing a pawn. So this is a very fun line, and actually one of the best continuations for black is not to play queen c7, but understand that e5 has to be played. I mean, come on. Give up the d5 square just like that? It's absolutely not an easiest move. So there's obviously more lines like this, but this was my idea where I wanted him to go. So a6, I would say that it's actually not the best move, and my opponent was taking a couple of minutes of thoughts, because usually this is what experienced players do. They don't rush forward. They double check everything. They try to remember what might have been his preparation. They try to understand where my opponent wants to take me. He tried to remember what are the recent games of this line, so what I'm missing here, etc. So that's why the experience really matters, because double, triple, quadruple check, because you have a lot of time on the clock. Once again, maybe I didn't mention, in Bundesliga, there's the super long time control, which is, what was it? 1 hour and 40 minutes for 40 moves, and 50 minutes after the second time control. A plus extra 30 seconds for every single move. So the games could be played something like 6 hours easily. So there's no rush at all. So he found the best move, knight of 6. I mean, not really found, but this is the best order of the moves. Short castle, again, very precise. And of course, at this level, everybody knows that accepting the pawn knight e4 is dangerous. I mean, it's very close to getting black into trouble immediately. Because after rook e1, it may not be obvious, but suddenly the spin of the knight on d7 and the stuck king in the center will bring immediate benefits to white. So d5 is c4. c4, d4 will rip apart the position, and I would say that the black is losing, quite unbelievably already losing. So the only move is knight f6 and d4. And this position is once again extremely dangerous for black. Just think about ideas like e6, d5, e5, and knight e5. Because black cannot take it, there's d6. So you see, once again, we have this bishop on a4 doing a wonderful job. So actually, black cannot do it like this, and he would have to play something like bishop e7 and try to escape, and he's actually already considerably worse. So this is one way for black to misplay this, but let's say he takes it, knight e4, this threat of knight b5, taking on d6, because the king on e8 is pinned, is once again a very powerful threat. So let's say e6 and knight b5. So this pawn is unprotected. Bishop e4 is also a huge threat, and actually the best move for black is already bishop e7, because queen b6, I think again it was very close to loss, something like bishop e4, e5, and I don't remember, maybe knight a3. So knight a3, knight c4, you just look at this position, and the question is what exactly, why black exactly went for this position to suffer for a pawn, right? I mean, of course, it's not a good idea, and that's why very good players never go into this line. Why not a6? There was something, just a second. Let's say a6, might be knight f5. I'm not really sure. I'm not really 100% sure, because knight e6 is a threat, or maybe even something like bishop g5 looks incredibly powerful. Bishop g5, knight f5, knight c6. Oh my goodness, there's so many threats. So black is essentially something like 3 tempos behind. Anyway, the bottom line is this pawn cannot be taken. And those in the circuit, they know that. They know. Because bishop a4, this is not a new move. People already know this. The trick is try to invite black to play a6 so that white can respond with c4. Knight f6. By the way, the same actually arises here. After a6, we still play c4. Oh, I'm sorry. Just a second. Yeah, here, a6, c4, and the same idea of knight e4, rook e1 again, knight f6, d4. Black is in a lot of trouble. So just to showcase you one line, take it, knight e4, g6, and now black gets slaughtered. I think the most precise was something like bishop f4, e5, and knight c6. Oh, sorry, not here, not knight c6. Just a second. I try to remember. Maybe it was here. Maybe it was here, knight c6. Bishop c6, rook is under attack, and queen d4. Yeah, now I remember. It's a very nice idea, because, I mean, once again, the rook is under attack, and rook c7, now you play queen f6, you cannot take it, you cannot take it, that's a pin, that's a pin, the rook is under attack, and black is just, you know, just removed from the board, wiped off. So there's a lot of ideas like this. So this knight c6 is a true shocker, but I believe there's also bishop f4 ideas. If black plays e6, this rook e6 sacrifice starts to appear on the horizon with a lot of crazy ideas like knight g7 and actually white, I'm sorry, I think it was bishop d2. Okay, to be honest, I already don't remember precisely the order of the moves, but black is under a very, very serious attack. So nobody takes the pawn. And that's why white safely castles short. He's not bluffing. He's offering the pawn for a huge attack. And of course, that's why black has to play e6. And after rook e1, a6. This is really, really smart. And of course, I was not surprised to see that my opponent picked up the best order in the moves, because this is the best order in the moves. White, he has committed himself to rook e1, which he does not always do. The point of c4 now, this is not the same. Because now after, I believe, bishop e7, d4, c. Yeah, I guess it's playable. C takes, knight e4, should castle. I did not manage to play queen d4, bishop b4 idea, because if you remember what I showed to you before, now we cannot play rook d1. Instead of knight c3, we have committed ourselves to rook e1. Our idea was to play rook d1, bishop d7, and bishop b4. You should remember that, right? And that's why this rook e1 idea inclusion this time for the c4 system is not the best. So I played c3. And after c3, b5, bishop c2, I found another way how to switch to some very interesting lines. So I was expecting my opponent to play c4, and this is the critical choice, and it's been played at the highest level for something like 3 years. The dark square bishop, we are going to wait for the bishop to be developed. First, we need to fight for the center, and then we are going to figure out where to position it. Right, so after c4, a4, this is the top-notch theory. And how do I know this? I wrote a database on this something like 3 years ago or 4 years ago for modern chess. I was one of the guys who invented some lines here. And after knight c5, queen e2, b takes on a4, I still remember there was a fresh new idea played by Egyptian strong grandmaster Amin Bassem. He first played this idea of bishop e3, and it was discovered after he read my database. And he came up with this new idea of bishop e3, and ever since bishop e3, which at the time, 2018, 2019, was a very rare move. Now you would open any database, it's the top played move. I mean, amongst people, obviously, who are studying theory. So this pawn on e4, it's incredibly risky to take. For example, here, right? You see suddenly black is starting to experience major problems with development. Let's say something like this. Let's say this. Bishop e7, knight e4. And again, black has the extra pawn. But what about this huge threat of knight e6? What about knight f5 at some point? So if the engine says king f8 is the best move, you have to understand there's a lot of trouble for black, because should castle, knight e6, queen e6, thank you for extra material. So this is a high-level chess, really. I mean, okay, not from the black's perspective. So that's why this knight e4 is not very good. And for example, knight f to e4 also is incredibly risky, because we just continue development. We keep an eye on this threat. Take it, take it. Now, this is a huge threat. And you know, I've played a couple of online games in this line where black would play bishop c6, which is a very reasonable move, except it almost loses by force. So take it, knight c4, and knight e5 is a killing attack with this threat, queen e6 threat, and just wave black goodbye. So bishop b5, hello GM solver, rook, queen e4 here, and that's it. Despite the fact that black is up 2 pawns, he simply lost. Short castle is queen h7, mate in 1. c4 is a big threat, the bishop is trapped. Knight f7, queen e6 is a huge threat. So how do you deal with all these threats, right? So this is one of the core ideas of this variation, and that's why it's so dangerous for black to take it. And actually, he has to play. What was it? I try to remember. Was it 97? To be honest, I already don't remember. Yeah, I think it was 97. And there's some new developments in this line. So, okay, now I'm probably talking too pro level, but there's bishop d4, played by theoretician Rustam Kasimjanov, bishop c5, rook sacrifice is a very common motive. For example, here, rook a4, and black once again cannot really take it because the king has to walk, and we rip apart black's position. Anyway, very interesting lines. So, you know the backstory. And when I went for this line, I found another way how to enter these positions, because normally I will play the same position with this order of the moves. c3, bishop c2 on d4. But the difference is this order of the moves allows black some choice, like g6, bishop g7, like e5, bishop e7, like b5, e5. There's many choices. That's why this bishop a4 actually removes black some choices. Anyway, let's fast forward. So my opponent decided to play bishop b7, which is a seemingly normal move, but at the same time, it allows white to grab the center with a very powerful pawn formation on d4 and e4. Bishop e7 makes sense because black does not really want to take on d4 because it gives up the c3 square for the knight. Think about knight c3, knight e2, knight g3. This is a very good square for the knight. He had prepared us? No, he had not. He played bishop b7 just to get me off from my preparation. So maybe let me put it this way. I hadn't prepared this because I thought that if he is going to go for this line, he's going to definitely push c4 because that is the major continuation. I thought if he's going to play bishop b7, well, I'm going to get the center. I'm going to figure something out. But it's not really so simple. And now after bishop e7, I didn't really have any deep preparation, but my idea was this. I want to put my knight on g3 because I'll have two knights at the king side, I'll have two bishops, and I'm looking at this possibility to organize a king side attack at the king side. And at any given moment, if, let's say, he plays c takes, just a sec, let's say, he plays c takes, d5, I always close the center and I get a favorable French defense because he cannot easily jump with the knight on e4 and this bishop is just staring at his pawn. If he doesn't do that, if he plays, let's say, c takes, and e5, I can play d5 and focus on the game at the queen side. Think about moves like a4, bishop d3, maybe knight b3, etc. So I do enjoy some space advantage. And now this bishop is staring at his own pawn. So that's why this position is not really so simple also from the black's perspective. He played pretty smart. He played queen c7, which is a good move. I directly went for the main idea, which is knight f1. I could have played it perhaps more smart, like bishop d3 right away. E5, I'm not sure. Maybe I can do it right away. And if I wanted to push e5, maybe I had to do it right away, because now after d takes on e5, d takes on e5, if he wants to eliminate my knight, I always have a backup and keep my pawn on e5 protected. But I didn't do it. So actually, now that I look at this, maybe e5 was a decent idea. So I played according to the plan. Knight f1. Yeah, by the way, if now he would take c takes, and play d5, I can still play e5, knight e4, and knight g3. So I force him to trade, and once again I have a very beautiful French defense typical setup where my bishops are far more active because they're looking at the long diagonals that his own bishop is staring here, and this bishop on b4 doesn't do much. So he decided not to force matters. I played knight g3. He played rook e8, and this was really smart from him because a rook e8 is a very useful idea in many positions. So at the same time, he is not really discovering his chosen setup. Does he want to play c takes, e5? Now knight f5, the bishop on e7 is protected and can actually retreat to f8. Maybe he is seeking for the right moment to push d5. Maybe he's seeking to play rook c8. So it's pretty smart. And now I figure out that I cannot play e5. Yeah, so this is just a bad moment to do this because he can simply take it and take it. So unfortunately, there is no beautiful sacrifice on e5 and bishop e4. Would be a great idea, but black has this retreat on d5, and we do not capture the queen. So this idea of e5, if I really wanted to do it, probably I had to do it right away. I didn't do it. And now it's not so easy to do it. So that's why I played a generic move, queen e2, sort of hinting at e5, but actually I just want maybe slowly develop my pieces and keep an eye on what is he gonna do in the center. And now he played something very interesting. He played a5, and I had a memory, a vague memory, that this is one of the top choices of Engine, because Engine really thinks the black is cool, and I guess he's right. So black wants to push everything at the queen side, try to get some targets, while not fixing the structure at the king side. Black always is watching out for e5, and this is where's the biggest difference between a strong grandmaster like Gajewski and let's say somebody less experienced. Because if I would play against lesser experienced opponent exactly the same setup, he would be more concerned about potential attack, and he would maybe come forward with some committal moves like e5, trying to stop the attack, which is not yet there, or try to play bishop f8, or maybe play h6 or g6 or something, give me more targets. And here black understands nothing yet is happening, but of course he was taking his time, so maybe very quickly I'll show that accepting the pawn on b5 is suicide. So my queen will be completely disconnected from action. So think about something like queen a3, d5. This is a discovered attack, and there's no way I'm ever gonna go for this. Even if I'm somehow not losing by force, it looks incredibly dangerous. So I realized I need to do something, and I wasn't sure what, because if I push e5 right away once again, he can take it. I cannot take with the queen because I lose the pawn on e5, right? So it's still the same. Although I was slightly looking at this funny line. Queen e2 and attack the knight on e5 and the queen on b5. But if he still plays bishop d6, my queen is disconnected from action. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, ah, come on. I cannot do this. The queen is completely disconnected. So I was actually quite surprised. I'm looking at such funny ideas like playing e5 and then trying to get the pawn on b5. But if I play g takes on f3, he plays knight e5. I cannot win the pawn because my his queen on c7 is pinning my bishop on c2. And I realized that this position is extremely dangerous for me. Although now the engine says it's actually great for black, great for white. Maybe g6 is not most precise, but I felt that my idea of king h1, rook g1, and do something at the g file, he's gonna see it coming miles away. So maybe 500 different circumstances was a playable move, but since he's trying to do something on the queen side, push a4, b4, create some targets while not fixing his king side, I decided to do a counter strike at the queen side. And the point is, now after b4, he once again needs to evaluate the consequences of e5. I probably would have played just bishop d3, just to keep all my my position together. And he took on d4. I took on d4. Very nice rook c8 attacking the bishop. Bishop d3 and b takes on a4. And here I had a revelation. I have misplayed my position because I wanted to play rook takes on a4 right away. But of course, with experience comes the understanding I have to double check what are my opponent's ideas. So I was looking at rook a4, And I had to check, of course, what about the queen sacrifice? Queen c1, rook c1, rook c1, and of course this looks quite dangerous, because if we would have played knight e1, there could be some ideas with d5 and bishop b4. But I wasn't really concerned, because I saw there's knight f1, he cannot improve the threat, and I could somehow get rid of this rook here, something like b3, rook a2, rook c4, rook c2, and this rook here is not going to pin my knight forever. However, it's not really so simple, because he can improve the idea. So I started to calculate what happens if he pushes d5 first. And now after e5, once again, I have to make sure there's no sacrifice, and there's no sacrifice, but he can play knight e4. And now this is where it gets really, really tricky, because if I take it now, there is a queen sacrifice. And now after take it, you see, I don't have the knight f1 anymore, because I just spent the knight for grabbing on e4 and knight e1. Let's not forget the rook in a8 is under attack. Unfortunately, he has knight b6, protecting the rook, pushing away the rook, and threatening to play bishop b4. Although this is not yet a threat, because his rook is ganging, I cannot simply find a good move. Let's say here, rook c8, and something like rook a3. Maybe I keep my position together, but it's not a fun position to play, because black is just so much more active, and he has connected rooks, and the pawn in a3 probably is going to fall. So I would imagine, okay, maybe white is not lost, but, you know, I'll have to fight for the draw for a long, long, long time. So I saw this here. I saw this before I took on a4. Yes, of course I asked him. And you know what, after the game, did he consider the sacrifice? You know, let me put it this way. At this level, we expect everything we see ourselves sees the opponent. Because you know that. I mean, these guys are trained the same way. They're seeing the same variations. They're calculating the same ideas. It's actually rare when you're playing about your level opponent, or maybe even stronger, and you expect that he's not seeing what you're seeing. He's seeing more sometimes. So that's why here after rook a4, I was absolutely sure he is going to play d5, e5, knight e4. I have to calculate, have to evaluate. And that's why instead of this automatic capture on a4, I started to think. Hello, Theo. I started to think, because I thought maybe I don't have to take on a4 right away. Maybe I can play something like bishop d2 and keep the idea of rook a4 for later. So I was really spending quite some time here. So I decided, okay, rook a4 is still working. Of course, he responded with d5, e5, knight e4, as expected. But I already came up with a continuation that I'm not going to take on e4, because luckily for us, this is not checkers. I mean, this is chess. We can choose. And I wanted to remove my bishop from here. And, you know, it's really weird, because now that I look at this position, I cannot explain myself why on earth did I not play rook a1, because this looks such a natural choice. You know, it's so strange. Protect the bishop on c1, threaten to play knight e4, and if he takes on g3, I play h takes on g3. I try to organize something at the king side. Think about moves like knight g5, queen h5, maybe g4, king g3, king g2, rook h1, and try to get to this pawn on h7, but it's probably very slow, so I think the opponent can probably kill off the attack with something like queen b6 and bishop a6. But you know, I have no answer, because I didn't see this move at all. So instead, I was focused on removing the bishop from c1. And I was thinking about bishop e3, but then I'm not really challenging the knight on e4 because I'm not really in the mood to take it. So I came up with this idea to play bishop f4, which is weird because if he takes on g3, h6 on g3, I'll have to retreat with the rook anyway. So I kind of didn't understand what I'm doing there. And I was expecting that if he's going to play f5 to strengthen his knight on e4, I have an intermezzo move. He takes it, and I take it. And as soon as I play bishop f4, I realized, wait, he has bishop e4, and now he can push f5. And when I went for bishop f4, I thought, nah, this cannot work, right? Because after bishop b4, I always have rook c1. And now if he sacrifices the queen, I do have knight f1. So that was my initial belief that this should be okay, right? Because there's no immediate threats, I'm very solid, I'm going to play something like g3, king g2, get rid of the pin, etc. And now he played bishop b4 anyway. So that means I'm probably wrong. So let me check, what's wrong with the rook c1 idea? So I try to calculate, take it, knight f1. He probably plays knight b6. Only move is probably here. And he plays something like knight c4. And the more I looked at this position, I realized what I'm doing here. I mean, there's no way I'm going to enjoy this position because knight e2 is such a huge threat. b3 is, oh my goodness, a fork. Actually, this kind of drops the queen. So I gotta do that. And let's say g3, knight e2, knight e2. Okay, engine found a way how not to lose this on the spot. Because after something like knight f1, what was it? b3, queen g4, h4, h5, somehow white escapes for the draw. But this is not how humans play. And I saw this, at least the idea of the sacrifice once again of c1, and I realized, oh my goodness, what did I just do? Could you take on b4 with the rook? You mean here? Yeah, but then I'm solidly worse, right? Because there's rook a1. Let's say g3, rook a1, king g2, I'm simply down a piece. This is how we lose it. Because he gives up the rook for the queen, but he gets the extra knight on top of it. So I realized, okay, I messed it up. So what I did, I decided to play rook f1 and make the face like I expected f5 to be played. And actually it was quite funny because we talked about the game in good spirits. And I told him, like, I made a facile expression like I allowed the 5 to be played. I like intended to do this. He was laughing. He said himself he wasn't really sure about f5 move himself, and that really shows a great understanding of the player, because it's like for many players moves like f5 is a no-brainer. I mean, come on, I mean, just keeps the knight on e4, and white is never really willing to take on e4, but he has this amazing experience and he knows that actually white is not obliged to take on e4, and the pawn on e6 in the long term could become weakness. So if I will play, let's say, queen e3, knight e2, remove the knight, f3, I could challenge the knight on e4. So if he's gonna take on g3 at some point, now the question is, why did he include f5 in the first place? To weaken the pawn on e6. So that's why also he said, yeah, okay, sure, you maybe misplayed it something, but for him, f5, it was definitely not an obvious choice. So, by the way, engine really likes this move, queen b6. Queen b6, give up a pawn, take it, bishop e4, queen e4, and queen c6. And now it's quite obvious that black enjoys very good compensation for the pawn, but you know, it's quite tricky, because I think it once again comes from the experience. Do you really want to sacrifice a pawn for a compensation in a good position? I'm sure he saw this. I mean, we didn't discuss this after the game, and this idea to sacrifice a pawn to get an outpost on d5, activate the pieces, would be an easy position, easy choice normally. But here black is doing great anyway, and that's why it's such a great. It's a really difficult choice for black to go this. Anyway, he did play f5, and after a5, I decided I need to fix the placement of the rook. Finally, I played rook a1. He played knight f8, which is normal move, threatening with some knight g6 ideas, challenge the bishop. I played very quickly rook c1, but actually the idea for me was I want to rearrange my pieces, and rook c1 was a part of my rearranging because I wanted to play queen d1, knight e2. So my ideal position, because I'm taught to think in terms of structures, so I understand that the structure, the good structure for me would be remove the queen, put the knight on e2, maybe bishop f3, put the knight on f4, and with g3, h4, make sure black is never playing h6 and g5. This is how I treat chess. And I just try to figure out what's the right order of the moves to do that. And I felt that I cannot really ignore the c file, so rook c1 is a reasonable move for me to include queen d1 afterward, not to block the rook from getting to c1. He played queen b6 very quickly. I thought queen d8 also looked interesting. Consider some counter-attacking ideas with g5. Let's say I cannot easily play h4. That could be knight g6. And suddenly I have some problems with the pawn on h4 and the bishop on f4 is under attack, so not really sure. So I guess I would have to play something very precise like bishop e3, which is what I did in the game. But he played very quickly queen b6, which is a natural choice. He wants to play bishop a6, eliminate his bad bishop. Otherwise, it's staring at the pawn. It's not really like my bishop on d3 is so powerful, but in the long term, I'm gonna get rid of this knight here. I'm gonna rip apart a position, and it can become a very strong piece. What is my classical chess playing style? I would like to say universal, because I used to be very positional. I'm still a very positional player, but I've come to enjoy a lot of sharp game. So I'm trying to become more universal player. I'm not afraid to play sharp lines. Maybe I'm not so well calculating them. I feel perhaps positional game a bit better, but I really like to play sharp games as well. And actually that's why I wrote this Sicilian Khan together with Igor Kovalenko. It's such a sharp repertoire, right? So trying to also explore this kind of chess. So I played bishop e3. Why did I play this? Because it fits according to my plan. I want to play maybe queen d1, knight e2, g3. The next moves, I make sure knight g6 is not coming with a tempo. Just in case, protect the pawn on d4. You never know, right? He took on c1, I took on c1, he played a4. And I just continue rearranging my pieces. Take it, rook a3. Now, since this rook on a3 is so dangerous and he's threatened with some bishop a6 ideas, I decided to trade it, which was not really mandatory, but I felt that, you know, in this position, I think it's a good idea. Always ask yourself, what is your ambition in this game? And I had a feeling that I've been on the defensive. I've been on the defensive since here. And I missed the shot because I wanted force king to take on g3, then organize this kingside attack. And now he plays f5. There's no kingside attack. So this means I'm on the defensive. I have to make sure that he doesn't crash through. And as soon as he played a4, a3, I asked myself a very simple question. How am I going to win this? It's not really clear. Okay, the second question. How does the team feel about the game? And of course, I have to check the results of the team because this is a team game. So once again, 8 players are playing for the team against my opponent's team. And I see the team is winning. Something like by 2 points. So of course, draw for me is good. So rook a1. We traded some pieces. I know quite funny something happened. This is sometimes so funny because this especially happens at the Gramster level. So, of course, I understand. I have no real chances to win the game, and it's not like I really want to, because, I mean, for the team, draw is good. I see no chances anyway to play for the win because the position is so equalish. The queen side has been traded off. And I think, okay, listen, what's the most ambitious way to make a draw? So it's like, I'm going to make a draw from this position of strength. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to play knight e2. He's gonna take on d3, I'm gonna take on d3, I'm gonna play g3, king g2, maybe remove the knight, f3, and I'm gonna make the facial expression like I'm the guy who is sort of making a draw from the position of strength. And I'm looking at this position, and I'm thinking, of course, I can take on a6, and then do exactly the same idea. But then he plays something like queen c4. He is sort of active, and I don't like his pieces being so close, although there's no real threats. And I think, okay, listen, I'm going to play knight e2. And then he plays bishop c4. And I realized, oh my goodness, he can play queen b5. And I cannot really take on c4. Because if I take on c4, he takes on c4 and he has a passed pawn. So something like d5, queen b3, I cannot really take it. Let's say d6. How do you play here? Because he's about to promote the queens. So that was like a small shock to me, this bishop c4, which I saw before, of course. I saw that he could occupy the square, but I didn't understand that it comes together with queen b5, attacking my bishop from d3, and I cannot easily defend it. So I had to make some active moves like h4, knight f4. Yeah, h4 is necessary so that I can play knight f4 and he cannot attack my pawn, my knight with g5. So he played queen b5, I played knight f4, and he had to take on d3. Knight e3, knight e3, h6, and the position is sort of slightly better, maybe according to the engines, but normally it's just a draw. So what happened? Suddenly he plays knight g6, and obviously I see I can snatch the pawn on e6. Because if I take on e6 right away, I just drop the piece. Obviously no good. But I thought I can take it. And he plays something like, I'm not sure, let's say c3. And I thought, okay, obviously my opponent is pushing me here so that I go for this position. But I've had a very simple logic. And the logic is this. If you play a game and you start to miss things, usually I don't accept any more adventures. So I missed it a couple of times. So let me go back so that you understand the backstory. I missed it first. I missed the entire idea of knight e4, queen c1, which is not great, right? So of course I spotted it just in time. I continued to play it on. I missed bishop b4, I can play rook c1 and f5. That's a second miss. The third miss, I missed bishop c4. So you understand, it's like 3 minor misses, but it just doesn't bode well. And that's why at this moment, when my opponent plays knight g6, of course, it's easy to understand why I don't want to take on e6. First, I already missed 3 times, so it's very easy to assume that I'm miscalculating. Second, I have low time on the clock. And third, draw is good for the team. So what I did, I just take on g6, pretty much without thinking. Take on g6, he cannot go here. I go knight f4, and that's a double attack. So he has to take on g6. Now, instead of taking on c4, he cannot take with f pawn. It's going to be knight g5. This pawn is in a lot of trouble. Now knight g5 is a very powerful idea. And now after knight g5, queen b3, he offered me a draw, which I felt like I have to think for a couple of minutes because I felt that he has to play bishop e7, trade away the bishop, and now it's opposite color bishops, and a draw. And he played queen b3, offered me a draw. Of course, I want a draw because it's after 3 misses, it's an acceptable result for me and also good for the team, but I try to make sure, can I somehow try to get queen behind him? But I guess I cannot. Queen b4, queen a1, queen b2, he's hunting my queen. Otherwise, if I would play bishop c1 and try to bother him here, I could try to capitalize on the fact my knight on g5 is really great. But I figure out that he always plays bishop e7, trades the knight on g5, so it's just a draw. So I agreed to draw. Anyway, it was quite an interesting game in terms of the action. Maybe not the most exciting one, but you saw those lines. You see that also grandmasters are missing things, and I missed in this game 3 moves, which maybe were not catastrophic. I was able to fix them, but it does affect the decision making later because it's sort of a small blow to the confidence that you're not seeing everything, and that is quite important.